live streamed, and obviously the public will be logging in as well. A recording of the public part of the meeting will be available on the Council's website within 24 hours of the meeting. This is the first occasion remote participants, officers, will be joining the meeting. Would remote participants please use their hands up icon in Teams, please, to indicate if they have a question. Please turn on your camera and microphones off when you are speaking. In-person attendees are required to wear masks on entry to the building and meeting room, but may remove them once seated. Would members and officers please remember to switch their microphone on when speaking and off when they are finished speaking. Please speak directly into the microphone. Would in-person attendees please switch off mobile phones or put on silent mode. Scan the NHS COVID-19 contact tracing QR poster at the entrance to the council chamber. Right, we'll move on to the agenda now. No apologies, Matt. I think we've got a full house, have we?
No apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Can I sign the published record of the meeting for the 13th of September?
Yep.
Thank you. Remind members of section 106. Have we any items? No, tonight? None of those tonight. And also disclosures of interest. And I'm assuming we do have some of them, Andy. Yeah, yeah. So the airport report, yeah, okay. Tamina? Of course you are. Okay, so we've got 3 that will have to leave the room. Am I correct? 4. Sorry, Kachita as well.
Non-pecuniary personal assistant as a
Yes, so you're declaring a non-pecuniary
interest in the house.
Okay, okay. Does that can Aslam stay then?
The house is ready.
Or does he have to leave the room?
He can stay for that.
They can stay for that. Okay. Everyone clear? Right. Business not covered by current forward plan general exception. We have an item and it is the Luton Bus Services Improvement Plan, or Bus Back Better. Over to you, Rob.
Thank you, Hazel. Must be a background, really. This briefing provides details on the principles of emerging the Luton Bus Service Improvement Plan under the National Bus Strategy for England to deliver better bus service and for passengers. This paper is a supplement to the main Luton BSIP report presented on 11th October 2021. In line with the BSIP guidance, the Council conducted its first BSIP survey online and in paper format between mid-August to mid-September 2021, to which the Council received 223 responses, which helped in the development of the BSIP targets, objectives and measures the Council will consider. In addition to the survey, working in partnership and negotiation with the bus operators and stakeholders, Luton has prepared its BSIP, which complements the most recent local transport plan and deliver the values of our corporate values. The Department for Transport BSIP guidance requires the Council to present its 3 priority targets, to which the Luton BSIP has presented its findings on the current situation, from which it sets an ambitious target of growth and the measures the Council intends to put in place to achieve them, providing the adequate funding it seeks from the DFT is still to be obtained. The 3 targets are targets for journey times and reliability improvements, and you have detail underneath all these. Targets for passenger growth and a customer satisfaction, which will be a passenger's charter. The principal areas of delivery covered by the BSIP and what is proposed for Luton: intensive service and investment on key corridors with routes that are easier to understand, alongside demand, responsive and socially necessary transport and integrated service patterns with other modes. Significant increase in bus priority, lower and simpler fares, seamless integrated local ticketing between operators and modes, local bus network presented as a single system with a clear passenger information, modern buses and decarbonisation, excellent customer service and the passenger charter, safer and more secure bus travel intensive services. While this BSIP has been produced by Luton Borough Council and Partners for Luton, It is understood that customers travelling between the different parts of the conurbation are not concerned about administrative boundaries. Bus users simply want easy to use, punctual, reliable, safe and seamless bus services. To achieve this, the council have worked extremely closely with colleagues from the neighbouring authorities, including Central Bedfordshire Council, Bedford Borough Council and their consultants. Through regular meetings and the use of memorandums of understanding, we have ensured that measures in the various BSIPs submitted by Luton Council and neighbouring authorities complement each other and have been closely coordinated. The table that you have in your agenda gives an overview of the measures and which principal areas. We have 10 specific topics they address. Some measures may address more than one topic. Measures shown in blue, which is in your agenda, have been coordinated with the neighbouring authorities of Central Bedfordshire and Bedford Borough Council. The 10 topic areas are intensive services and investment on key corridor with routes that are easier to understand. There must be significant increase in bus priority. Fares must be lower and simple. There must be a seamless integrated local ticketing between operators, and this should be across all types of transport. Service patterns must be integrated with other modes. The local bus network is presented as a single system that works together with clear passenger information. Modern buses and decarbonisation give bus passengers more of a voice and a say through a charter. More demand, responsive services and socially necessary transport. Longer term transformation of network through bus rapid transit and other measures. And regular updates. I just want to say before I finish, this is not a Luton Borough Council policy. It's the Luton Borough Council that had to facilitate this. By the government asked them to facilitate it with the bus users and partners such as we just mentioned. So it's not a policy that from Luton Borough Council. So the executive is requested to consider and agree the Luton Bus Service Improvement Plan, draft report and supporting documents, that it can be submitted to the Department for Transport for consideration for funding commencing April 2023 and authorise the Service Director, Property, Construction and Infrastructure in conjunction with the portfolio holder to agree any further minor changes to the draft Luton Bus Service Improvement Plan report. Thank you. And of course, we don't know about funding at all yet.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Tom?
Just one question. I wonder if through this working party, Rob will be able to start negotiations with the bus company about only buses what have low carbon, low emissions will be allowed to use a busway. Anyone else will be charged for using the busway. That way we encourage companies to go, we've done it with all the council fleet. We've gone for a low carbon diesel. I don't see why the bus companies can't.
Yeah, that's not a problem, Tom. I think
busway's got to be a big stick we can wave at.
Yeah, if I can defer bring Roger in there. I think Roger, is there some work done on this already? I think.
Roger?
Did you hear? Is there some work? I believe there's some work done on the busway with decarbonisation of buses.
Yes, there is indeed. And Tom, one of the potential outcomes of submitting this plan is the opportunity to go for grant funding towards a greener fleet. So this is something of an enabler in that regard.
Joe, I'm saying is because the private companies are going to want to maximise the profit. The low carbon diesel costs 8p a litre more. If we've got a stick of the busway, if we can wave that sticker and say you'll be able to use this free of charge if you use low carbon fuels. If you don't, we should put a cost onto the busway, onto those operators what use it, what don't use low carbon fuels, so we can spend that money elsewhere on reducing the carbon in the town.
Yeah, we can have those conversations, Tom. No problem.
Yeah, no, thank you, Hazel. In your report, clearly suggests that Luton is the fourth worst congested town. That has to show the seriousness of traffic issue within our town. And if I look at the map that you've got, clearly shows from Milton Keynes, Houghton Regis into town centre. And although the report is very detailed, what we really need to think about is what is it that is going to take the traffic off the roads and enable people. And you've clearly talked about the affordability, which is very important, welcoming bus service and timely bus service, and park and rides and enforcement. For me, those are the key ingredients that we really need to sort of work on and work on hard. If we don't sort of, do the enforcement strictly, corner parkings, inappropriate parking, that doesn't improve the traffic flow. It blocks and it congests. And when we talk about those areas which link into main routes, we don't have a service or bus service for people that encourages them to get onto the bus. It means walking probably a few miles down the road before you go on to a proper bus route, which takes you into the town centre, which is a simple, straightforward route. So I hope that, when you are looking into the bus service and looking at the future offer, that we look at these ingredients and get it right, because if we don't, then you're forever trying to correct it. So I would look forward to hearing some comments about that. And,
Yeah, you're right.
In some places, obviously, enabling parking for people to park so they can get onto the bus, like park and rides in certain areas have worked really well.
I think in the report, I stand correct, but I think it also says that basically that was the being the fourth worst town since 2017 is no longer, because of what they've been putting in already in the highways and the walking and the cycling. So I don't think we're any longer the fourth worst congested in the country, town in the country. In relation to the other points you made, it's all about what you were saying in relation to mobility and getting people onto buses and to walking, to cycling, and people out of cars. But to do that, you have to have a good service, you're right. And it's got to be a service that everybody wants to feel safe with, feel clean with, and it's cheap, because residents have always told me that if you've got a mother and two children, it's cheaper to get a taxi into the town than it is on a bus. So they're all the things that we'll be looking at through this. So how can we make it cheaper for families on the bus? And that's all in the report, as you say. So hopefully that report is going to get people onto buses and out their cars.
Yeah, thank you, Hazel. About 5 years ago, the Scrutiny Board was looking at the bus partnership, and Arriva came along and told us that all of the nasty, smelly double-deckers would be gone by the end of 2019. Now, yes, they have reduced the numbers, but there are still some running. Does anybody have any idea when they will all be gone?
I don't know if Roger does. We do know I think there is a date in relation to getting all these old buses off the road. But Roger, I don't know if you know that date, do you?
We have a meeting with Arriva this week, David, just to explore that thing. So I'll come back to you separately if that's okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hazel. I felt like it was telling that you talked about whether we get the money, because we're obviously putting a bid in for an amount of money. I guess, was there a limit on the amount of money that we were able to put in for? And I guess my fundamental question is this meaningful and significant in terms of, is it going to be a step change in bus services and the ability of that parent with two children to actually choose to get the bus because it's cheaper overall than to get a taxi, and it's a good service, it's reliable and it's well networked? Like, is it meaningful and sufficient for the step change, or has central government announced something and put some money there to make it look good, and maybe the reality isn't going to be? I guess I want a gauge of whether you think it's actually going to make the difference. I guess there's the question of whether we get the full amount of money or not. But, yeah.
It's all down to the funding, really. We have no idea what funding we're going to get. We know what we're looking for. We know what we think we need. But will they give us that? We don't know. If we get that or close to it, then we can do some work on it. The other thing to look at, that funding's only going to last for 3 years. So what happens after 3 years? That's another thing we need to look at. My gut feeling is that the government will probably want to say, well, they're all running well again now. The bus service is back and running, and we supported you out of COVID, and now you're on your own. That'd be my feeling, with the funding. But yes, if we get the right funding, we can do some good work on it. Yeah.
Thank you, Hazel. This item is the end of year outturn for the 2020-2021 financial year. This is the last report of the old measures that we had for performance monitoring, because we're going to move to some changes, not a total change, but quite a lot of changes to have our performance measures more in line with our ambitions that no one is stuck in poverty by 2040, and that we have addressed climate change as an issue for our town as best we can within the resources that we have as well by 2040. So that's actually what the next item begins reporting on, those new performance indicators. So this is the last time we'll see this exact set of performance indicators, and on top of it being the last time, it's the financial year in which the pandemic was upending absolutely everything. So the extent to which we can say anything much meaningful from this set of performance indicators is fairly limited. There's quite a lot of missing data in there because of things like exams not happening. And yeah, there's lots of sectors within there that have been hit significantly. So there's no way we could expect them to be in line with the performance indicators as originally set. But saying that, there are a few areas that, reading through it, I thought were notable. So although we haven't had that many children adopted from care within the reporting period, we have had more foster carers signing up. A good number of foster carers are reported within so it's all in the appendix, the detail of the performance indicators. So yeah, there was a good number of foster carers, and actually within that same department, performance was improving in terms of the overall proportion of children's social care staff who are agency workers, and that's something that the staff in that department are continuing to work on and seeking to really move in a positive direction. We've got an ambition that we will get to a place where we have 10% of our workforce. That's coming down significantly from where it has been historically, only 10% of the workforce being agency by February 2022. And part of that is to do with the new social work academy that is run in conjunction with the university. Housing metrics within the appendix are broadly still showing the right trajectory, and I would also happy to report that timeliness of benefit changes and new claims is well within the parameters we set for good performance, which hasn't always been the case historically. We've been doing some good work in terms of moving some of those to automated processes, and that's really paying dividends. So I think the big picture is it's not a set of performance indicators that we're going to see again, and a lot of things weren't really that measurable within the pandemic. But I'll take any questions I can. And then the next item, as I say, is the new set of performance indicators. So this is the quarter 1 performance for 2021-2022. Obviously, we're still in pandemic, in a pandemic. Certainly at the beginning of the financial year, we obviously still are now, but the impact on the kinds of things that we measure in our performance indicators will still be being worked out over this financial year, certainly, and quite possibly over future financial years as well. I think it's very hard to say what the overall impact of something as significant as we've been through over the last 18 months is going to be, and what that's going to mean for our performance indicators. But this is the new set of performance indicators. As I say, it's about gearing our performance indicators to be in line with our ambition that no one's stuck in poverty by 2040 in our town, and that we have addressed climate change within the resources that we have available as best we can. So that is the new report. As with the old report, all of the actual detail is the appendix rather than the official council report. Some changes have been made, I think, in conjunction with scrutiny. I'm looking at David, he's giving a nod, to add an RNA and a G where it's red, amber and green. So when it's printed out in black and white, people can still read it. It's nice and helpful. And also the thing that I think is most helpful, and it means that if the report is shorter, we're doing well, there's a red report at the end. So all of the items that are red, and actually that's probably quite helpful, because often when you get a red item, there's actually quite a good explanation for what's going on there, or like it's really helpful to understand the complexity of that. So I think actually that initiative of having a red report at the end of the appendix, the outline of kind of how each area is doing. There's a red report that sets out all of the red indicators and gives a bit of detail on why each one is red. I think that's quite a nice innovation, and hopefully that section of the report won't have to be too long, although, as I say, we've been through a pandemic, and I suspect that in the next, well, certainly this financial year and probably at least the next financial year as well, we'll have some of that kind of petering through, and hopefully we'll be resuming kind of back to more normality over the next couple of years. But yeah, I think that will still be there to quite a significant extent. There are a few new indicators that I noticed. So the passport to employment, it's a nice indicator. We've been doing some really good work there initially with Vauxhalls, but very much expanded to many other areas of the town in terms of getting people work ready, and actually a very simple route through to well-paid and secure employment in our town. So that's a really good metric that I'm pleased to see in there. And influenceable spend in terms of our procurement strategy of trying to ensure that as great a proportion of our spend in terms of when we're commissioning services and resources from outside of the organisation, that is spent locally as far as is possible. That's something that we have ambitions to see rise, and actually to influence other large public sector organisations within the town to see that rise for them as well, because that will be really positive for our local economy if we can see that growing. Happy to report that claims and changes in terms of benefits are still in the good performance area, and that, as I say, is to do with good work that's been done over the last few years in terms of automating some of those processes. There's a new homelessness prevention work indicator in there, which is good, and as I say, the red report I think is a really helpful innovation, which I'm pleased to see there. There's quite a lot of data pending. As you'll notice within the report, if you look through, there's quite a few areas where it's not available yet, and a few I noticed where it says it's not going to be available for another a year or two, because some of it's collected historically. So I think we need to keep thinking about this and bedding it in. But the fundamental premise of moving to a new set of performance indicators, which is in line with our ambitions for Luton by 2040, I think is absolutely the right thing to do. I think there'll be a bit of work in terms of bottoming out whether these are the right areas to look for the data from, and whether they're quite the right indicators, and whether they come through often enough with the data. But that's something that will, that's a piece of work that will happen over coming months and quarters. But with that, I'll move the report and take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Andy, for the briefing you gave us. Are there any questions on it?
Just a comment.
Yes.
Yeah,
Just wanted to say the economic recovery, we know that it's challenging. We've had a lot of people who've been sort of claiming benefits, but a team around supporting people moving closer to a new job, upskilling other than apprenticeship, have done a tremendous job, and you can see that by number of claimants are going down, and we would see more work around that, and especially looking at those kids who haven't sort of gone on to university level, who are looking at sort of developing skills, whether it's bricklaying, electrician. And we did a tour around Barnfield College, trying to sort of bring everything together and create those pathways. There's a lot of work going on at the moment, and we really are confident that we'll bring more positive results to the executive in the near future.
Okay, thank you, Hassan. Anybody else? Happy to agree the report? Agreed. Thank you very much. Thank you, Andy. On to you again. Treasury management.
Thank you, Hazel. This is my last report for the evening. This is our Treasury management report for the last financial year that ran 2020 to 2021. Obviously, some impact of the pandemic within those figures that we're setting out there. It's a requirement for us, a legal requirement in line with the SIPA regulations and the SIPA code of practice for us to report on the Treasury management position for each financial year, and this report will go to our audit committee as well as full council. Yes. In essence, Treasury management is about all of our borrowings and our investments as well. Usually our investments, because we choose to internally borrow on any reserves that we hold, because that is a much better position than investing them, to use it instead to offset the rate we would be borrowing at elsewhere otherwise. Usually our investments are just of our cash balances, our day-to-day funding that needs to be readily accessible, so you get a very, very low rate of return on that. We actually managed a rate of return of 0.12%, which is 50% above the London interbank day rate. I think that's probably what that LIBID. I think that's probably what that stands for, which is 0.08%, and also above our average forecast, which was 0.1%. So we did reasonably well in terms of those cash balances that we have to hold. But when you're holding cash balances and investing them, there's not really any way to get a significant rate of return on those, because you have to have access to them immediately for cash flow purposes. We had £84 million of in-year borrowing in line with council-approved projects, and within the entire year we remained within our prudential limits. The table at paragraph 5 shows that because this was the year that the pandemic hit, we scaled back some of our programs to focus on responding to the pandemic, but most of that spend has been reprofiled into this financial year, to 2021-2022. For example, our temporary accommodation purchasing scheme was moved back by a year. There are a nice couple of paragraphs later in the report, which I believe are around paragraph 23, which set out how we would respond. It's good to think about these things in advance, how we would respond if there was deflation, if there was inflation, in terms of if interest rates were going down or going up. Because it's fairly stable at the moment, it's still the right position. It's been historically this for a number of years now to, as I've already said, internally borrow on our reserves rather than choosing to invest those and to draw down on official borrowing for some of the capital projects that we've undertaken. I suspect that will remain the case for a number of years. But Dev and his colleagues are continuously monitoring the point at which we would want to make that switch as rates start to increase, if and when they do. And paragraph 25 sets out our in-year borrowing. And the appendices are nice at the end. They set out our kind of total borrowing positions and the dates at which loans are going to mature as well. So happy to take any questions. As I say, we stayed within our prudential limits throughout the year, and it's just an overview of our overall activity in terms of borrowing and investments. Move the recommendation.
It's not critically important, and I'm sure Dev and his team have got their fingers well and truly on the pulse of it. But the financial situation is changing so rapidly. It's only 3 or 4 weeks ago, the Bank of England officials were talking about possibly moving to negative interest rates. Now, all of a sudden, after such a very short time, all the talk is about increasing interest rates rather than reducing them. All I'm saying is it's a very tricky and dangerous position, and a fast changing one. And I'm sure Dev and his team and their advisors have got the best view that they possibly can of what's going on. What more can you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is something that is perhaps more unsettled than it has been historically. We are in, fairly significant times and have been over the last 18 months. And as we come out of those, there are, bumps and peaks and troughs, and inflation is rising, and the Bank of England might choose to do something about that by raising the base rate. We'll have to wait and see. But as I say, there are a couple of paragraphs in the report that already set out the approach that we would take in those situations. And we have Arlene Close, who are our advisors on projected rates of Bank of England base rate. As you say, Dev and his colleagues are keeping an eye to this every day, and will continue to do so. But there will be a time if the base rate continues to rise over future years and does start to rise significantly and moves up, there will come a time when it would be prudent to make a switch between internal borrowing and long-term loans. But at the same time, as soon as you take long-term loans instead of borrowing internally on our cash reserves, you then have to invest those reserves, and the rate of return we're going to get on those is, as I say, not going to be much more than 0.1%. And actually what we're offsetting is 2 or 3% in terms of the borrowing. So it's probably quite a period of time before it would be the time to switch. But as I say, Deb and his colleagues are keeping an eye on that day to day.
I think Andy spelled it out. Most of our loans, if I can remember, are on fixed terms. So if the rates are increased, we will not have an implication on some of those loans. Am I right in thinking that, Dave? And in terms of switching, if the loans are up for review, then if the rates are low, then we can think about sort of, coming into the new rates.
Which sets out when, I think it's Appendix 1, it might be Appendix 2, I think it's Appendix 2, sorry. When loans are going to come due, and therefore when you can switch out of the rate that you were paying into a new rate, which at this point in time probably is lower than what we signed up to when we, because when we take a loan from the Public Works Loans Board, it's usually 20 years or 30 years or for a fixed period of time. It was a long time ago when anything that's maturing was taken out. So it's quite probable that we're going to get a much better rate if we are choosing to borrow that money again. But obviously, as set out within the report, you do make a minimum revenue provision in each year's budget to offset loans that you've taken, so you don't have a continuously escalating capital financing requirement.
No? Happy to agree to the Treasury Management Report. Agreed. Thank you. We now move on to the item on creating a vision for the Oxcam consultation response, and we have a response from Scrutiny. Did you want to deal with that one now, David?
Yeah, thank you, Hazel. There was a general feeling as we were going through it that there was although this is early stages and there's further consultation to come with more detail and all the rest of it, there was a very strong feeling that there's a danger of Luton slipping into being a sort of also ran on the fringes, not quite involved. And that's a danger that we hope the council's responses will help to avoid. Although, to be fair, the response to the next round is more likely to be more meaningful in that respect. But I think the suggestion is that some words go into the response to make sure that the government understands that Luton needs to be mainstream as far as this is concerned and not on the fringes.
Okay, thank you, David. Rob?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to accept that. I see the recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Board on the agenda, and one of the recommendations is to consider the feedback and reference from the OSB and give delegated authority to the Service Director and the portfolio holder to make changes and agree the final response by the deadline of October 12th. So those, quite happy with those changes.
Okay. Do you want to? So you've incorporated that into the next report. Okay. We'll move on to the full report then. And over to you, Rob.
This report seeks executive endorsement of the Council's response to the Government's consultation on the version of the Oxcam ARC. The consultation relates to the first stage in the production of a spatial framework. The Council's response is set out in Appendix 1. The new framework will have both policies for growth as well as identifying where there is potential for growth and infrastructure. As Luton sits within the ARC, there are potential benefits of being part of this wider area. For example, being part of this area could bring additional jobs and investment in Luton. More housing will be delivered, which could bring down house prices. A renewed focus on the environment and investment in the environment. As expected, this consultation document does not yet include any specific proposals or spatial areas identified for growth. Rather, it is concerned with establishing principles in relation to economy, infrastructure, design, environment and resource management. The next stage will identify potential areas for future growth and will be accompanied by a sustainability appraisal. The government aim is to publish the full draft document in autumn 2022, with the final one shortly after. The timetable is outlined in the consultation document. The consultation format is geared towards members of the public, but there are some more open questions where our responses reflect the opportunities and priorities for Luton. We need to talk a bit about the planning considerations in this agenda. The spatial framework will provide new national planning policy guidance for the ARC area and these local authorities that are from it. This means that we will be required to have regard to it when preparing our own local plan and take it into account where relevant when making decisions on planning applications. In the same way, we are required to have regard to the National Planning Policy Framework. At the current time, it's difficult to envisage exactly how this will affect the review of the Luton Local Plan. The potential locations for growth at the next stage of the consultation could provide further opportunities for improved infrastructure, access to jobs and homes for Luton, and this is emphasised in our draft response. Generally, the response is positive, as this document provides an opportunity for Luton to play a bigger role and gain from its inclusion in the ARC. We've already done the recommendations for the OSB, so the recommendation for this item of the agenda is that we agree the response to the current consultation set out on Appendix 1 in this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rob. Are there any questions from anybody? Sam?
Just comments and supporting the report. I mean, currently we've got our sort of master plan for the town. You already highlighted that, you know, we're one of the most congested. We've got a lot of health inequalities. Over and beyond what we as a council have a plan, we need to understand what benefit the ARC will deliver for Luton. When we're talking about that sort of train link from Oxford going across to Cambridge, how are we going to benefit from it? What employment opportunities are we going to get? And if we're talking about affordable housing over and about what we are projecting, how will that sort of, you know, the whole network is going to help and support, not deliver our vision, but, you know, over and beyond, looking at, you know, for future years, what that partnership is going to look like. So we need to look at those benefits. And obviously in your report, you know, you've stated some of that, and really grateful the scrutiny has also picked that up and you've incorporated. So, you know, we really need to understand that partnership and what benefits it will bring to Luton.
Yeah, that's exactly what we need to do. And as the OSB has pointed out, we need to look, you know, that scrutiny is a, you know, plus for us to look at going forward. But in relation to the train, the East and West Rail strategy they got in place is there is, it looks to me so far that there could be a benefit to Luton Airport in relation to that train, because there's going to be a drop off somewhere in the middle of there and it goes straight into Luton Airport. So that will looks as though that may be a benefit there as well. But you're right, we need to look at all the benefits for Luton. We are a little dot on that bottom and we need to make sure we benefit from this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Andy, sorry.
Thanks, Hazel. I do agree with the concern that we're kind of right on the edge and could be forgotten about somewhat. I think that's really important to argue our case. I also really liked that there's notes around young populations as well. I think it's incredibly significant that as a town we have a quarter of our population in school, basically, or younger. I think that is something we really need to get our heads around more and do some more thinking about how that means we should respond in terms of our services, etc., etc. And the other thing, I think it's in there, but maybe this is the question really. I think in urban areas, we're really lucky in Luton that we've got wonderful countryside around us, but I think it can sometimes be difficult to get out into that. And actually, I think this is something that the ARC strategy might be able to address. And I think it's in there, but I didn't quite see the detail of. Maybe you could talk to whether you see that's in there in terms of getting people who live in urban environments out into the countryside around those towns and cities.
Yes, I mean, all these points, you know, this is what we're looking for tonight, these points to take forward. But in relation to the urban areas and getting out to countryside, I'm now sitting on the Chiltern Conservation Board. And one of their things they want to do is to get the people of Luton out into the countryside. So, you know, it's coming from both angles there. Thank you.
Anybody else? No? Happy to go with the report?
Yep.
Thank you very much, everybody. Now move on to population wellbeing and discharging our housing duty. Tom?
Yeah, as you know, Chair, in 2018, the government in its wisdom decided that councils could discharge their housing duty with just a 6-month short-hold tenancy. We in Luton have always fought against that and tried to avoid it wherever we can. It's just wrong. It's just a big merry-go-round where the same people keep coming back to us time after time. As landlords go and get an eviction order that's at the end of the 6 months, they'll just tell the people to get out. We've got 80 odd families outside the borough at the moment. Those 80 odd families I'm not going to go into the reasons they're outside the borough tonight, but some of them are got real serious problems and they've had to be moved out of the borough very quickly indeed. What the report is saying that asking us to agree to use the 2018 Housing Act, discharging our duty outside the borough by giving a 2-year tenancy. I'm not convinced 2 years is long enough, but what it does is give these families a chance of stability where they're being moved to, and it gives them a chance for the kids to get into school, get a decent education, not moving schools and moving around every 6 months, which in my view is completely wrong. And I hope Luton Council never goes down the road of using the 2018 Housing Act. The report's in front of you. There's on the recommendations, there's a couple of bits missing. One, if any of these families disagree with the decision to discharge, we need to give them the right to appeal to the Housing Appeals Subcommittee. And I'd like also to put in the report that lengthening the terms of the length of a lease any time can be agreed in consultation with the portfolio holder.
You want them put in the recommendation,
Yeah.
Tom?
Yeah, that's it.
Have we got a form of words for what you've just
Number
said?
one is just housing appeals. It's in the report that they've got the power to go to housing appeals, but it's not in the recommendation the officers have put round. But it's actually written into the report. And the fact that lengthening leases, rather than come back to the executive every time, if we get a chance to lengthen some of them leases to 5 years, I'd love to do it. Or 3 years, I'd love to do it. But it can be done in conjunction with the portfolio holder.
And is that in the report
That's in the report.
or implicit in the report rather than written in
It's
the
not
report?
written in the recommendation. So.
No. Okay. Abbas?
Thank you, Chair. So 2 years is the minimum. So can we do 3 years to give them extra insurance?
I would love to do 3 years, Chair. Absolutely love to do it.
But it
Even
doesn't.
better.
I can't see any mentioned anywhere in the recommendations. So can we
For-
put it in there?
For suitability, 3 years is more than acceptable. A 3-year lease isn't that long in the private sector anyway.
Can we add that into the recommendations then as well? Then?
You haven't got anything in the recommendation for the amount of years, but I'm assuming it's implicit. Yeah. Yeah. So what's the views of the executive on moving from 2 to 3 years? Sorry, I'm just getting some advice here. Colin. Okay, Colin, did you want to say something? Yeah.
Thank you, Leader. The 2 years is generally speaking the standard across assured short-hold tenancies, and the reason why it's 2 years is because the council's got a continuing duty to a homeless household when they house them in the private sector for 2 years, and 2 years, generally speaking, is what landlords will agree to. Now, after 2 years, we can then renegotiate. If the landlord doesn't want the tenant to remain there, obviously they'll become homeless again, but it's our job to prevent homelessness. But if we go with 3 years, that is likely to basically put a big hole in this policy because landlords aren't used to 3-year tenancies. The 6 months is generally speaking a standard, but we only will negotiate at 6 months in a prevention move for a homeless household. But when it comes to actually moving someone permanently, in inverted commas, it's generally speaking 2 years, and that's generally speaking the standard. If we go to a 3 years, it will be a very difficult negotiation stance. As well as that, there's money attached to that period of time, and that would mean that I'll have to come back to potentially to our finance colleagues to ask for some more resources to resource this. The actual policy is predicated on a 2-year tenancy at the moment.
I can't understand what Colin's just said. Why would you have to go back to finance? Because there'd be no difference between 2 years and 3 years if we sign the lease. They've got a permanent lease. They've been taken out of our homeless figures. So why would you need to go back to finance? And number two, we've got 3-year leases in the town already with certain landlords. So why are you making a hole in it? I don't know. I accepted the 3 years. I think the executives accepted the 3 years. All right, but I'll still.
I'll just clarify this issue about leases. At the moment, temporary accommodation leases roughly around 3 years, but that's for an agreed rent for every month for 3 years. We're trying to move away from guaranteed rents in the borough because it's quite costly. So discharging our duty will be into an assured short tenancy, which is a proper tenancy. It's not a lease. So the issue around whether it's 2 years, 3 years, I would love it to be 3 years. That gives the family more stability. But at the moment, we're not there yet. This is a relatively new concept in Luton, and we need to go with the standard. If we just go with 3 years, landlords are not going to buy this at all, and this whole policy, I think, will fall apart. Thank you.
Join in on what we're trying to do here.
I believe it will be a much more difficult sell for landlords. I've been talking to landlords and the team about 2-year discharge of duty tenancies, and that's what happens in London. That's what happens across England. If we can get 3 years, we will attempt to negotiate longer periods because it's more sustainable for the family. But at the moment, I don't think Luton's ready for that discussion, that negotiation.
Okay, it's open up for discussion.
With what Colin says, if he doesn't give us that flexibility, and if it's going to cost us more, maybe perhaps we can, if it's new concept, we can continue with 2 years, and if it need be at later stage, perhaps we can look at that, Tom.
The length of time can be agreed with the portfolio holder.
Coming back through the exec, Tom, to be honest. Yeah, I prefer that. Andy.
Thanks, Hazel. Yeah, just to make clear that I feel instinctively uncomfortable about changing policy on the hoof. If we've agreed something with officers, bringing it forwards as agreed feels like the right thing, particularly when an officer comes and says that's going to cause some complications. My personal instinct, it's just what it is, would be to agree what we've agreed with the officers. If we want to try and change that, we can bring something different back in time. But yeah, my personal instinct is always.
Is there a possibility that we could perhaps go with the 2 years, Tom? If we get landlords that are willing to settle with us for a longer period, we can look at the policy again. Okay, I'm opening it up to the exec. Rob?
Thank you. There's two things on here that that's important to me. One is the tenancy time, and I did initially think it was 2 years, and we managed to increase it to 2 years, which I was happy with, you know. But I think what Tom's saying, I think what you started to say, I'm not sure that this is a 2 years in here. However, if they can get 3 years, they will do. You know, I think that's what he's saying, although the policy says 2 years. But if they can negotiate 3 years with somebody, and I said, well, I'm happy for 3 years, then they would do that. And I think that's fine. You know,
but if you put it in the recommendation that you wanted for 3 years, then the negotiation will start at 3 years.
Yeah, but I think what he's saying is, I might what he's trying to be saying is if the negotiation would be 2 years, but if they're able, if the landlord is willing to do 3, they would do it. Is that not right? Or
yeah, but I don't think that's quite what Tom's saying. He's saying we will start at 3 years.
I would rather we start at 3 years and negotiate. Most landlords now are looking for fixed rent coming in for a long period. We've already put all the stuff in the recommendation about inspecting the properties and making sure the properties are at a standard we rent them out at. We've already got all that in there. 2 years 2 years gives more stability than the government recommendations of 6 months. 3 years gives those families with kids. But don't forget, a lot of those families have been through an awful lot of stuff and had to be moved out of Luton. 3 years gives them a lot more stability. And if the landlords won't go for 3 years, that's why I put down the portfolio, but Hazel said she wants it to come back, that then we will settle for 2. But let's go for 3 in the first place. And it's all about giving those families stability for a length of time, which we can't give on a 6-month short hold, which is a government's recommendations.
David, I'll bring you in, Dev.
Yeah, far be it from me to spoil the fun, but I really can't see why you can't have in your policy a minimum of 2 years, and where a landlord is willing to give you 3, then fine, you take it gratefully.
Andy, and I'll bring you in, Conchita.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. The
Yeah.
policy can say 2 years. Maybe even the recommendation that we agree could say officers to attempt to get 3 years
Get
or
3 years.
even longer if possible. But the policy
Yeah.
says 2 years, so there's actually no discrepancy there, and we're doing both things
But
at
we'll go
once.
for 2 if we can't. Yeah. Okay. Conchita?
Andy said it all.
We said it all.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah.
Fine.
Go for two.
Dev, you wanted to come in. I'd like to
Just-
understand the point made about the cost.
Yeah, I think I agree with minimum 2 years, and I agree with what Colin said. The reason why we mentioned Finance Councillor Shaw is we work out the incentive for a 2-year package. So we work out the numbers, how much potentially we can offer for the landlord to sign up the 2-year package and how much savings we are going to generate over
We'll
the
make,
next 2 years. So the incentive and the savings from the 2-year package, we work those numbers. But we can go and quite rightly, if there's a minimum of 2 years, we work out if we extend it to 3 years, what savings we are going to generate, how much more that package will cost the council, because there's a cost to offering that incentive to landlord to sign up that 2-year lease. And that's why Colin mentioned you have to work on the numbers to say, well, they're 3 year. If it stacks up and it's beneficial, then yeah, we say 2 years minimum and work out those numbers. And if Colin can get those, it will be a win-win. So that was on the finance side. Thanks.
Can I just get this right? What we're kind of recommending that we go for 2 years, but if we can get 3, we will. Is that more or less what members are saying? So if we can get more, even fine. Yeah, that's great.
Sorry, Hazel, I think we're saying, let's get it, that we'll go for 3 and then we can't. 2's the fallback.
No, that wasn't what members were saying, Javid. They were saying, let's go for 2, and if we can get 3, that's fine.
For 3 years, but your answer doesn't really stack up, does it? Because if those people come back to us after just 2 years of back into temporary accommodation in Luton, it'll cost them even more money. So if they come back after 3 years, it costs you less money. You know, once they're back in temporary accommodation in Luton, the cost is falling on us. They got a 3-year tenancy, then it's picked up by the general fund outside through the normal rents or universal credit through the normal rent system. So you've actually got a saving by going to 3 years.
I think, just to clarify, we said minimum 2 years. So we're not saying we're not going to do 3 years. What we've said is when we work out the incentive and the figures, we assume that was a recommendation going forward. And what I've said is, picking up from Andy said, right now I can't work out the numbers, but the principle you're saying, yes, might mix, but we haven't worked the numbers. So for me, just to agree something now without working the numbers, we have to work those numbers. But the principle is right. If we say minimum 2 years, and if say 3 years, still it stacks up, so it's still within the recommendation. So. Right, so have I got this right? We're going for 2 years on the basis that if we can get 3, we will. Is that what everybody agrees we've agreed tonight? All right, Thomas? I know you'd have had it the other way round, but we'll settle for that one. Yeah? You'll go with that. You've got something. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Is the report agreed then? Thank you very much. Right. Draft housing assistance policy.
You all know really about the same housing policy. What we're saying is, big savings is on the transport. Big savings is transport. The investment will be spread it out a little bit more. Non-managing disabled grants. We will also do loans to people, large families that want to stay in their own houses. But those loans and the work will be done through the council's agency scheme. We will not pay any more to builders, you know, your uncle down the road or someone you met in the pub, that kind of stuff, than what the agency scheme actually stacked it up as. On top of that, we've got a problem with foster carers. What we want to do is be able to give loans to build extensions for foster carers. Once they have signed a contract with the council to be fosterers, then we will make loans available. There'll be a small charge on the loans, a very small charge, I hope, Dev, because I didn't want any, but the officers convinced me to accept a small charge. But the idea of that is the money will be recycled all the time with the repayments, so we can keep giving it out as loans. So it's loft extensions, extensions for adoption. One of the big ones in there is we're coming up against some big walls now for long-term empty properties, because a lot of these properties, we can do the forced sales, we can do all that kind of stuff, but a lot of them are just a property what, you know, the daughter's inherited or the son's inherited, wasn't in a fit condition. What we're saying is we'll give loans for those properties to be fetched back into a good condition, but the loan will be repayable as long as they rent the property out for a length of time. If they sell it, they'll have to pay back all the loan. There's 4 or 5 new changes in there. They're all being put into categories, but they're the main ones. I hope we can all support it. It means spending all our 1.9 million, I believe it is what's in the budget. You've already got money in the HRA for aids and adaptations to council tenants, so it'll have no effect on that whatsoever. You've got the recommendations down there. I hope we can do it, but make it very clear the amount of times over the last 4 or 5 years I've had to get involved because my uncle Tom came and built my extension for us and it cost us £8,000 more than you said it had cost. And say, well, sorry, we're not paying that £8,000. A lot of people have come forward for this. We'll do it on a first come, first served basis. We'll aim target at what will do most good, foster caring and that kind of stuff, and fetching empty properties back into use for rent or sale. The home improvement grants will carry on. We won't be able to do a mega amount of the loft extensions for large families to stay where they are. So again, it's going to have to be on a first come, first served basis, and there'll be a waiting list built up over it. There's a lot of new stuff. I hope you can accept it all, but it'll do a lot of good in Luton and it'll help out across the council, especially with foster caring. Because one of the things, what we come across all the time is the properties aren't big enough. We've got loans available to put it on there, but that'll be on a strictly, you will have had to assign a contract with the council just to give you the money for your extension.
Okay, are there any questions? Aslan?
Yeah, no, broadly I support the report, Tom, but there are some of the challenges within the system. The list of the builders is a bit restrictive, which means some of the cost of the building. One of the reasons why people want to go outside the agency is that you equally have got some good builders. Not everyone's a cowboy out there, but yet the cost of the build is less, which means they don't have to either borrow or spend that kind of money. And sometimes the plans are so, I suppose that there needs to be a greater collaboration between the adaptation team and the planning department. Quite often there's restriction to what you can have and can't have. And that a lot of people then want to turn away and just go and do their own building in their own way because the recommendations from the adaptation sometimes are unrealistic. For example, if you have 2 living rooms and one, recommendation is you turn one living room into a toilet, for example. So if you already got overcrowded home, you're taking away, although you maybe are given a bedroom, but you are taking away the living room. So we need to sort of, look at how we can improve the offer a little bit and perhaps broaden the list of builders. So there's competitiveness within there as well in terms of when it comes to pricing.
I have no problem increasing the list of people what are on there, on the list. We've got I think it's Shanton, we've got a meeting with procurement, a training session with procurement. It's one of the questions we can ask them why we can't do that. I think it should be done, and not especially on the greening stuff. But on the greening stuff is to take some people off the list, because I've seen some of the work what's being done at the moment, and I don't know how they qualified for it. It's because no one's checking and that kind of stuff. But we'll come back with a report over the next couple of months over that. No problem increasing the builders, but it's not that. The OTs are professionals. They normally know what that family needs. They go through the family's history. They might not be thinking now, they might be thinking what they'll need in 5-6 years' time. I find some real odd ones. One on Peregrine Road, but they made it so difficult to get in the front door. I can't understand why. The bloke was in a wheelchair, he had to go back down his ramp, he had to open the door, go back down the ramp again to open the door. So when I met the OT down there, she says it's the only exercise he'll get all day in that wheelchair. So we made it so he's got to, exercise to get the doors open. And sometimes when I first looked at it, I thought the OT had gone balmy, but they hadn't. They really thought about what the person needed and everything else. We can widen the builders, but I believe we need to say to people, if you go outside the agency agreement and use your own builder, because we still got to inspect it, we will not release the money till all items are done. Because the amount of times to use someone else, not the agent, we go out and do the inspection and we find out the plumbing's not right, or there's not enough insulation in the walls, all that kind of stuff, because of the promises they've made. And then there's an argument, housing appeal sub, or with me in the offices, because we refuse to release the money because the building's not satisfactory. So there need to be quality builders that are coming on the list. We do need to widen the list in the council, and that could be a way of doing it, but it's going to be a quality mark to make sure that they fit in with what we want. Local work for local people, we've got no problem with. But let's not think we're going to be doing 100 loft extensions next year. We might do 3 or 4. That's 3 or 4 big families are going to be able to stay in the properties they're in. All the rest will carry on as normal, the discretionary stuff. The mandatory stuff will not affect, we'll carry on with all the mandatory stuff. These are all the discretionary items we're talking about now. And those discretionary items, we've never had a list before. You've got one in front of you tonight. Okay.
Anybody else? Yes, Rob, sorry.
Well, firstly, when you look at the goals and objectives, you cannot fail to support this policy. In all fairness, they're really great. But the bit I just want to look at, ask a question about, if I may, is around the key risks, where it talks about the leading to additional demand, which we cannot meet. I just wonder if you can explain that a little bit more to me. And does that mean people will have to wait until funding comes again or something like that?
No, you've got it now. It's no different from disabled facilities grants, where there's a 2 or 3 year wait for some of them. Because, we might only be, the grant, the actual extensions, the cost of them has gone up over the last 3-4 years, where you used to be paying 30-40, now you might be paying 60, whatever, for, decent size extension with a bathroom in it, disabled toilet, a complete disabled bathroom and a bedroom. So there is a waiting list. That's what I'm trying to do, is control people's expectations. They come on the list. If they're first on the list, they'll get it done. But if they're 15th on the list, they're not going to get it done till next year or the year after. We've only got so much money, unless Andy finds £10 million he can give me, so I can do £10 million worth of extensions and everything else, which isn't going to happen. So what we need to do is put that small charge on. And the idea now, one of the big changes in policy we've got tonight, is the money will be recycled, coming back in loans for the non-mandatory stuff, all the extensions, all that. That'll come back in loans to us, and greening. Because one of the big things is, what I prefer to spend it all on is, people when they go for external wall insulation on their properties, a lot of the times when they're just above a certain level of income into the property, they've got to find 10%. It doesn't matter if you're a pound above that income level. Well, we can give small grants out or small loans to cover that 10%. So more people, more owner occupiers will be able to get external wall insulation done, even if they're on a low wage. So there's all that kind of stuff in the report. We can't do it all. We do so many of every one a year. There will be a waiting list, but people will get an opportunity they've never had before.
Abbas.
Thanks, Hazel. Tom, if you turn to page 276 or 36 of the report, is item number 20.7. On completion, so empty homes assistance, yeah? On completion, the owner of the property must sign up to an agreement to make the property available for letting for a period of 5 years, okay, to households on the housing register, nominated by the council. Yeah, the property may be let and rent for no more than the local housing allowance levels. So what are the difference? What's the difference then?
Even this on universal credit, it's called the local housing allowance, which is a level what the council should pay for a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom property, the most they're allowed to pay. We do pay some landlords a top up on top of that, but we can't pay it to all landlords. So the reason we say LHA is we know people will qualify for that benefit if they went into that property.
What you just said, because I know landlords who are getting top ups.
Yeah.
On top of this LHA, so that's why I was like, hold on, what's going on?
I'm paying the top up, it'll be a loan and LHA.
Okay, yeah. Anybody else? Happy to agree the report? Yeah, okay. Right, I'm now going to read the regulation. I hope I can take it as read, and we're going to move into private. And can I ask our colleagues to leave the room